Today we're going to be studying from Ezra chapters 5 and 6. We had learned that King Cyrus had issued a decree that the Israelites, whose ever heart was moved by God, could go back and start rebuilding a second temple. He had like 42,000 something people that went back, along with some of their servants and singers, and total like 49,800 and something. So at this point, last time that we learned that they had started the rebuilding. Jeshua, the high priest, and Zerubbabel were the guys in charge. They start first with the altar. They had rebuilt the altar, then they laid the foundation. But the whole time they're doing all this work, the people around them are causing trouble for them. They get frightened at times and probably slowed down the work of what they could have done. But 5 years into the rebuilding, they're getting walls rebuilt. They're getting the city walls and the temple walls, all that starting to get come together, and they're getting close to being finished. But the people that have been causing them trouble know that they don't want them to be successful. So they send a letter to who took place of King Cyrus. His name was Artaxerxes. They sent a letter saying, you need to ask these people to stop. They've just about finished their temple and rebuilding the city walls. And if you allow them to do that, they're going to not pay their taxes. They're going to start taking over land and taking away your kingdom and stuff. And so this letter really upset Artaxerxes. He took it seriously. He checked into the records and saw that what they accused the Israelites of doing in the past, that they had been guilty of doing that. King Zedekiah had stopped paying tribute and had not been doing what he should have when he was taken over by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. So he ends up saying, okay, yep, I want you to order that they stop right away. And he sends this letter to the people that were trying to cause these problems over the last 5 years. And so now they got the approval of a king from Persia to force the people of Israel to stop. They didn't entreat God during this time. They just went ahead and stopped. For 10 years, they have not returned to rebuilding. They were told by that King Artaxerxes, you can't start rebuilding again until I give you authority and power to do that. Well, he died, and the next guy that's in power now is King Darius. And he is into his second year of reigning when he gets an awareness from the people of Israel that they're in trouble, that their building has stopped. The only reason why they're asking for his help at this point is because Zechariah and Haggai, that are the prophets, have been told by God that you need to go talk to Jeshua and Zerubbabel and all the people of Israel and let them know I'm not happy with them, that they've stopped, that they should have continued building. If they had asked for my help, I could have helped protect them. He doesn't exactly go into that detail, but we're going to see how when they rebel at this point and they entreat the help of King Darius, God's going to move on Darius's heart to give them success. So we're going to pick up now with chapter 5. When the prophets Haggai and the prophet when the prophets Haggai and the prophet and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who were over them, then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. Okay, so because of this report that God put in the mouth of Zechariah and Haggai, they both said the same thing, that God's not happy with you guys. You guys should be rebuilding and you should never have stopped. They're going to get to right away starting to rebuild, even though they don't have the king's approval in Persia. They'd never gotten another approval because the guy died, and they just had never continued to try to start rebuilding again. But this time, because of the two prophets saying this, they're going to listen to God. They're going to obey. They hop to it right away. So this is where they're going to be encouraging them, the two prophets, because they've got the word of God now. So they're encouraging them, yes, do this, because good, I'm glad you're believing us. We're going to be here to encourage you to keep building. They didn't just give them the message and run away. They're there to continue to encourage them to keep going, even though they're going to get a lot of pushback from the people around that had stopped them the 10 years earlier. Those same people, now there's new leaders that are going to give them trouble. and we'll see who they are. Verse 3. At this time, Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shethra-bozenai and their colleagues came to them and spoke to them thus. This is what they say. Who issued you a decree to rebuild this temple and to finish the structure? Then we told them accordingly what the names of the men who were reconstructing this building. So the Israelites are like, you know what? We haven't gotten a decree, but talk to our leaders. Here they are. Here's the names of our leaders. They're the ones that are reconstructing. Okay, verse 5. But the eye of their God was on the elders and the Jews, and they did not stop them until a report should come to Darius, and then a written reply be returned concerning it. So these guys, even though they're trying to stop Israel and the leaders, Jeshua, Zerubbabel, all the people of Israel that are beginning to rebuild the temple and the city, God is putting favor upon the hearts of these Tattenai and this guy. Even though they want to stop it, they're not forcing them to stop until they are going to the Israelites are making a plea to Darius. And so they're going to wait for the reply from Darius before they start strong arming them to stop. So they're not willing to do that yet. God's favor is keeping the enemies from stopping their work while they're waiting for a reply from King Darius. Okay, so this is what they send. Verse 6. This is a copy of the letter which Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river. Okay, let me correct what I just said. It's not the Israelites that's sending a letter. It's actually Tattenai that is sending a letter to the king in Persia, trying to get him to go ahead and support the fact that King Artaxerxes had said to stop it. So they're hoping that Darius is going to say the same thing, but they're not going to stop them from rebuilding while they're waiting for this reply. So it's Tattenai and this other guy that is actually entreating Darius's help. Okay, so this is a copy of the letter which Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shethar-bozenai and his colleagues, the officials who were beyond the river, sent to Darius the king. They sent a report to him in which it was written thus: To Darius the king, all peace. Let it be known to the king that we have gone to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God, which is being built with huge stones, and beams are being laid in the walls. And this work is going on with great care, and is succeeding in their hands. Then we asked those elders and said to them thus: Who issued you a decree to rebuild this temple and to finish this structure? We also asked them their names, the names of their leaders, so as to inform you, and that we might write down the names of the men who were at their head. And thus they answered us, saying, We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king, Solomon, of Israel built and finished. But because our fathers had provoked the God of heaven to wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. And also the gold and silver utensils of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and brought them to the temple of Babylon. These King Cyrus took from the temple of Babylon, and they were given to one whose name was Sheshbazzar. That's again Zerubbabel's old name, his name under the Babylonian kingdom, whom he had appointed governor. So that's how we know that this is Zerubbabel, because Zerubbabel's the one that's governor here. So that was his Babylonian name, Sheshbazzar. Okay, verse 15. And he said to him, Take these utensils and go and deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt in its place. Then that Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God in Jerusalem, and from then until now it has been under construction, and it is not yet completed. Now, it wasn't under construction for those 10 years where they were doing nothing until, again, Haggai and Zechariah was sent to them and said, God's not happy with you guys. You guys should be building this temple and you've stopped and it's not good, that you need to get started again. Okay, so he's giving a very accurate history of what has happened since this is, and he got his information from the leaders, and this is what he's writing down. This Tetanai has wrote this history of, okay, well, this area once did have a great king that ruled here. He's the one that built the first temple, but because we were not obedient to God, he put us into captivity in Babylon, and this temple was completely destroyed. But King Cyrus, after our captivity 70 years later, had put it on his heart to allow us to come back to rebuild a second temple. He even gave us some of the utensils that were in the original temple that King Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the first temple. He gave us help, from money and stuff. So we were able to start rebuilding. And so he did get a very accurate understanding, and he is being honest about what they would have told him. So this is all the stuff that he's telling King Darius in this letter. Okay, verse 17. And now, if it pleases the king, let a search be conducted in the king's treasure house, which is there in Babylon, if it be that a decree was issued by King Cyrus to rebuild this house of God at Jerusalem. And let the king send to us his decision concerning this matter. Okay, so these guys at least aren't making up lies like the other guys when they wrote to King Artaxerxes and said, well, it was kind of a half lie. Again, there had been some kings that had stopped paying the tribute to Nebuchadnezzar, so that was accurate, but Zerubbabel and Jeshua were not planning on stopping paying their tribute, so that part of it was a lie. So that's why when Artaxerxes did the check, yes, that was accurate, that the kingdom had rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, and they once had been a very powerful kingdom. So, because of his fear of losing part of his kingdom and losing that money, he had stopped the rebuilding. These guys, at least, are not trying to sway one way or the other. They're really asking, okay, this is what they're telling us. Will you check now? Check and see if Cyrus really did issue a decree, see if they're telling the truth. And so this is what Darius is going to do in chapter 6. So now we're on Ezra chapter 6, verse 1. Then King Darius issued a decree, and search was made in the archives where the treasures were stored in Babylon, and in Ecbatana, in the fortress, which is in the province of Media, a scroll was found, and there was written in it as follows: Memorandum. In the first year of King Cyrus, Cyrus the king issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the temple, the place where sacrifices are offered, be rebuilt, and let its foundations be retained, its height being 60 cubits, and its width 60 cubits. So notice, it was the king, Cyrus, that decided how big this temple was going to be. It wasn't up to Solomon and all the plans that God had given David for how the first temple was going to be rebuilt. God had put it on the heart of King Cyrus to let them build the second temple, but it was going to be nothing like the size of the first one. So he's got instructions. When the Israelites came back to rebuild it, they were only allowed to build it as big as he's saying, the 60 by 60 cubits. Okay, so verse 4. And then there's more instructions of how to rebuild this. I'm going to back up just a little bit. It says, let the temple, the place where sacrifices are offered, be rebuilt, and let its foundations be retained, its height being 60 cubits and its width 60 cubits, with 3 layers of huge stones and 1 layer of timbers, and let the cost be paid from the royal treasury. So Cyrus is saying, I'll pay for it. My treasury will help pay for this. Verse 5, and also let the gold and the silver utensils of the temple of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, be returned and brought to their places in the temple in Jerusalem, and you shall put them in the house of God. So obviously they're getting support. This guy Darius found the memorandum by Cyrus that says what his instructions were. So let's find out how he's going to react to it now that he's found out that they actually told the truth. Okay, it says, this is where he's going to weigh in now. Now, therefore, Tetanai, governor of the province beyond the river, Shelthra-Bozenai, and your colleagues, the officials of the provinces beyond the river, keep away from there. Leave this work on the house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its site. Moreover, I issue a decree. Now, this is Darius's decree. I issue a decree concerning what you are to do for these elders of Judah in the rebuilding of this house of God. The full cost is to be paid to these people from the royal treasury out of the taxes of the provinces beyond the river, and that without delay. So he's basically saying, Darius is saying, yep, it's going to keep helping. I'm going to help them by letting you guys who are near these provinces that are near Israel, I'm going to help ask you to help give your taxes instead of sending them to me, send them to the Israelites. Help them to rebuild this temple without delay, he says. Okay, verse 9. And whatever is needed, both young bulls, rams, and lambs for a burnt offering to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and anointing oil, as the priests in Jerusalem request, it is to be given to them daily without fail, that they may offer acceptable sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and his sons. So what does he get out of it? He's saying, I want to help by helping them rebuild, and all I'm asking of them is that they pray that me and my sons will be prosperous, basically, that things will go well for us. The life of me and my sons, that's what I want them to pray for. Verse 11, and I issued a decree that any man who violates this edict, a timber shall be drawn from his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house shall be made a refuse heap on account of this. Okay, so Darius is even threatening that anybody that comes against the Israelites, this is what they're supposed to have happen to them. Their house, if you take one of the timbers out of, like, it would be like taking a foundational piece out of a house, what would happen? The whole house would collapse. So it would destroy that person's house, and then that timber that they took out that collapsed the house, that person was to be impaled on. They were to be killed on it. So I do believe that there's going to be a fear about trying to mess with the Israelites after they get this decree from Darius. Nobody's going to want to mess with them. Okay, verse 12. And may the God who has caused his name to dwell there overthrow any king or people who attempts to change it, so as to destroy this house of God in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have issued this decree. Let it be carried out with all diligence. Okay, so boy, he's really in support now of the people here. And he's saying that anybody that chooses to get in the way, even if it's another king, I myself am asking that God try to destroy those people. And if I have to help, I think that's what he's getting at. Even if I have to help, I will help. I'll use my army to make sure that nobody tries to stop these people and to destroy the house that's going to be rebuilt, the temple in Jerusalem. So, and he's saying, I want this carried out with all diligence, not just with half-heartedness. He says, all diligence. I want the work done quickly. Okay, from this point forward, it's going to be another 4 years, and the temple will be completely, and the city will be completely redone, and everything will be ready. So once they get the help of King Darius, the work's going to go a lot faster. Okay, verse 13. Then Tetanai, the governor of the province beyond the river, Shethar-Bozenai, and their colleagues carried out with the decree with all diligence, just as King Darius had sent. Verse 14. And the elders of the Jews were successful in building through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they finished building according to the command of the God of Israel and the decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar. It was the 6th year of the reign of King Artaxerxes. And the sons of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. Okay, so the total amount of time that it took with the break and everything was 20 years. It took them 20 years to be able to build this temple. 5 years, 10 years that they came to stop, and then about another 5 years to, before they got Darius's help, they started rebuilding again. So it was approximately between 19 and 20 years that it took to finally rebuild the whole thing. Okay, verse 17. And they offered for the dedication of this temple of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, corresponding to the number of the tribes of Israel. Then they appointed the priests to their divisions and the Levites in their orders for the service of God in Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. So they begin, everything's been completed. They're making sure that they're following the law of Moses of how to carry out the temple sacrifices and everything, just like that what they had before. They're going to be starting everything back up, and they want to make sure that they're doing it just the way it was commanded by Moses. That was the original instruction that Moses got on the mountain, up on the mountain. They want to make sure that they're following exactly what the Old Testament earlier books, in the books Exodus or wherever he gave all the instructions. They want to make sure they're doing it exactly the way that they need to. Okay, verse 19. And that exiles observed the Passover on the 14th of the first month. Okay, so this is their first month of the year. That would be in April. Now, we know today that the Israelites, when they say the first month, they're talking about Rosh Hashanah, around that what would have been their seventh month, according to the way that the old Jewish calendar was when now they got their first month. And people think that the reason why their calendar has changed is because of the captivity. When they went to Babylon, they started using Babylonian time. But the Passover was used to always be considered the first month of their year. That was in April, not in September or October, like what Rosh Hashanah will now fall in. Okay, so don't be confused. They do change some of their time frames just because of their captivity. But here they're going back to the Jewish calendar, what they would have been using. And they're saying the first month is actually going to be in April. Okay, so that's when the Passover would have been, around March or April. Okay, verse 20. For the priests and the Levites had purified themselves together, all of them were pure. Then they slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the exiles, both for their brothers and the priests and for themselves. And the sons of Israel who returned from exile, and all those who had separated themselves from the impurity of the nations of the land to join them to seek the Lord God of Israel, ate the Passover. Okay, so notice they had separated themselves from the other nations. At this point, they're not intermarrying, but somewhere between this point when they finish the second temple and the time that Ezra is going to arrive, 69 years after the issue of the rebuilding of the temple by Cyrus, sometime in between these times, they're going to go back to intermarrying again. But at this point, they're not. They're keeping the Passover. Anybody that had separated themselves from the people of the land around them, they weren't intermarrying, could be participating in this. So they're making sure, because part of the punishment, if they didn't keep the law, should have been separation with their own people. It's like shunning what we would think of, the Amish people, what they do. Well, that's the same thing. If the Jewish people weren't willing to get circumcised, or they weren't willing to keep the feasts and be separate from the other nations, they could shun them like that. That was part of their law. They would be separated and they wouldn't be allowed to participate in this Passover or any other festival. Okay, verse 22. And they observed the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had caused them to rejoice and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them to encourage them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. This is the only place where I have found that the king of Persia is called also the king of Assyria. So notice it's the same regions that the 10 tribes have been taken to. The king of Assyria had a certain area of land. Well, this king of Persia now has control of that same area that the Syrians had taken the 10 tribes off into captivity at. So he is now being referred to here as the king of Assyria, although most of the time he's referred to the king of Persia. So that's just a very interesting thing I wanted to point out. It kind of makes me think of the fact that when the Antichrist comes on the scene, he's going to be called the king of the north. And many times there's a reference to that guy as the king of Assyria. So it makes me believe that the Antichrist is going to be from this region of Babylon. Like it would include Iraq, Iran, Syria, Turkey. All those regions were what the Persian Empire, they were in control of that. So the fact that he's called the Assyrian here, it could be including any of those regions. I don't believe it's going to be a revived Roman Empire, that it's going to be like the European nations that are going to make up that 10 kingdom, the 10 toes. When you look at the war of Ezekiel 38, all the nations that are coming against Israel, this Antichrist is head of all these areas, and it names some of them. And it's areas of Turkey, Syria, Northern Africa. You're talking about Ethiopia, Libya. It names the people. It's all in the Middle East. I don't believe that this guy that would be head over the Antichrist that's head over all these 10 nations would be from a European country when all these are Middle Eastern or Northern Africa kings that are coming against Israel at the very end when Jesus comes to help fighting against the battle. So, again, that's just some extra information to try to pull all this stuff together. When I see these connections, sometimes I throw them in there, even though it has nothing to do with the chapter, because I think that it gives us clues in other chapters of parts of the Bible that help us to determine what's really going to happen later in the book of Revelation and what Daniel was talking about. So anyhow, that's free information in addition to what we just learned here. So let me describe this Passover feast and why he's now saying that for 7 days they're celebrating this feast of unleavened bread. Passover was on the 14th day. Feast of unleavened bread went on for 7 days. It included the Passover. So it's almost like it's a combination of both these things. You go from the 14th day of sacrificing the lamb that would have been sacrificed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the same time that Jesus died on the cross on Passover. Don't think that's a coincidence. Okay, so you've got that part of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It included the Passover on the 14th day. The very next day, the 15th day of unleavened bread, would be considered a special Sabbath. So when we got the book of John saying that when Jesus died, that the next day was going to be a special Sabbath, I believe this proves that Jesus was actually crucified on what we would call our Thursday. Thursday would have began on Wednesday night on the Jewish calendar, and it would have been finished by Thursday night. That's when they went into the next day for them. So this whole thing of Jesus's crucifixion would have been, if he was going to be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, in the grave, then he couldn't have been crucified on a Friday. That would have had to been a Thursday that he was put into the tomb. And on Sunday, on the first day of the week, he's rising from the dead. That would have been 3 days, 3 nights. So just, again, some more information, but that's why there would have been a special Sabbath. The 15th day of unleavened bread was always a special Sabbath. Whatever day it fell on, didn't matter if it was a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, it was considered a special Sabbath. They had to observe it. So they would have kept that Thursday, would have been a special Sabbath for the people. Then the Friday, Thursday to Friday, Thursday evening to, again, because of the Jewish calendar, it makes it confusing. But let's just say that we'll just call it our day. So Friday would have been a special Sabbath. Saturday would have been their regular Sabbath. So they weren't allowed to go and prepare the Lord's body until the Sunday morning when the ladies went. So there would have been 2 Sabbaths in a row because of the 15th and then the normal Sabbath. You had Friday and you had Saturday that they had to keep as a Sabbath when Jesus was crucified. So on the 7th day, there was also another special Sabbath. So because this day was, it's not like when we celebrate Christmas on the 25th, we never know. Every year it's different because it's not like it's always on a Sunday. or always on a Monday. It changes year to year depending on what day that it just happens to fall on that particular day. So some celebrations, they'll say, like Pentecost, it always falls on a Sunday. It has to be the first Sunday, that our day of Sunday. That's after it's, they have to wait at least 50 days because Pentecost is 50. But if it happens that it's not a Sunday on that 50th day, they have to wait for that Sunday that's coming up. I know I'm giving a lot of details and sometimes I confuse people, but there's some people that might like this kind of in-depth teaching so that you understand some of these things. But anyhow, that is where we're going to end today, that they have completed the rebuilding. They immediately go into a Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread celebration.